Hello and welcome to the Auto Guide Show. This week, Kyle drives the newest version of an icon. Honda does the obvious. Should we worry about the Mustang? And our special guest has a very interesting perspective from racing. But first, a word from our sponsor. Picture this. You're halfway through a DIY car fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. It's okay, because you know whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything: brakes, headlights, cold air intakes, whatever you need, and it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need, at the prices you'll love, guaranteed fit every time. eBay, things people love. All right, so to kick things off, Kyle went on a first drive of what I would still personally say is the front-wheel drive performance vehicle. Like, it's the one you think of the most. I know Honda has a big history with their Type Rs, but when I think front-wheel drive performance, VW GTI.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the one that created the hot hatch segment, right? 50 years ago, if anyone wants to feel particularly old. So I went to Volkswagen's head office in Virginia, and we drove both the updated GTI and the Golf R, which you'll probably hear about next week. But we thought it would be best to split them up and talk about, well, the icon first, right? The R is fast, and it gets even faster for 2025. But really, I think the GTI hits such a sweet spot, right? It's pretty darn quick because, of course, it's a German car. So even though it is quoted at 241 horsepower, same as before, it feels way quicker than that. Oh, yeah. And it is practical. It looks good. It's classy enough, whereas some other front drive performance cars can be kind of hooligans. So I feel like this really just Elantra. Yeah. Whereas this, like, you show up somewhere nice and this fits in, but also you can take it to a track day and it will still do respectable stuff. We actually had it on a track, a very challenging, small 1.1 mile track. And the GTI is a blast there. So for 25, not a whole lot has changed. There is different styling, although good luck telling it apart.
I know. I was trying to do that. I'm like, are the headlights different, maybe?
Yes. So the headlights before, the lower portions were more rounded. These are a little more angular now. There's a new wheel design, the mid-trim model, because there's three trims: the base S, the SE, and the Autobahn. Or in Canada, just the latter two. The SE gets new seats from the GTI Club Sport in Europe. And there's just a few bits of tech that have trickled down the lineup. So things that were previously only on the Autobahn are now on the SE, things like that. And there's a big new touchscreen running VW's infotainment. But there are illuminated sliders.
It's probably very similar, if not the one that I drove in the Cupra a couple weeks ago, because it's the new big screen. And yeah, I mean, it's all touch and sliders, but it's way more responsive, at least from what I found.
Yes, and there's a new wheel in the GTI, a steering wheel that you don't get in the Golf R. And so they've removed the touch-sensitive sliders on that too. And so now it is actual rocker buttons. The weird thing is, for the Golf R, the reason that it doesn't get the new wheel is because it has the R mode button on its wheel, and thus they had to keep the old one.
Now the ball's in your court, Mercedes. Time for you to remove those touch-sensitive weird thumb things.
Weirdly, I like the Mercedes ones because I find that I'm, using the main menu screen without having to poke at it. So I like using them. This is, I think, because you're, tend to be having more fun behind the wheel of a GTI. You're hitting them by accident, or you were. So yeah, it's not a lot different. It's not a lot more money either, which is nice. And it's the ideal hot hatch in my mind. It isn't quite as spacious as something like a Civic Si because it is a lot shorter, but that makes it really easy to park. I like how it sounds, but of course the big news, I've gone this long without talking about it, is that the 6-speed manual is gone. So people will be a little sad about that.
Conspiracies. It's all conspiracies. That's what people keep telling me online, that everybody in the world would buy a manual if they were available.
Yeah, and so
tell it to the people who still offer manuals and can't move any.
Exactly. And so VW of America explained to us that Canada and American buyers, or Canadian and American buyers, showed up for the GTI. It was a take rate of 30 to 40%, depending on the market, for the manual. It's just that nowhere else in the world does that. The Golf R doesn't even offer a manual in its home country, and the GTI's take rate before this facelift was 3% in Germany. So
But
you can't
Kyle,
justify it, right?
everyone drives manuals in Europe. That's what I'm always told, and diesels.
It's so
Where's
weird
the
that we've swapped. In Europe, it's like
yeah.
high performance cars are auto, and the lower cheap stuff is still manual. And for us, we're like, oh, you have a high performance car? I would like a manual, please.
I wonder if there's some weird correlation where like Americans and Canadians, we like nostalgia. That's why we hung on to our big meaty V8s and our manuals, whereas in Europe it's always been about the best performance and efficiency. And they're just like, well, automatics are way better in every regard now, so why do we need a manual?
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. But yeah, so that's the thing. I really enjoyed the GTI, and I look forward to maybe spending some more time with it long term at some point this year.
Yeah. So like you said, 50 years to be relevant and arguably still the poster child of the segment. It was just a crazy fun, pretty quick car to begin with. And like you said, now it's sophisticated, refined, still quick. Like it does everything and it adapts with the market,
Yeah.
which is going to segue us into a future story. But go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say quickly, but I actually don't really want to spoil it. So Volkswagen did a nice little surprise and brought the first two generations of GTI along for this event. Didn't tell us till we got there. I drove the original, and I'm going to save my full thoughts for a later episode of the podcast because it's special.
And I'm going to be that car nerd listening to this, smashing his keyboard right now, saying, "No, Kyle, you drove the second and third generation because we never got the first generation in Canada or US or wherever we are."
Oh yeah, and it's a Rabbit. It's not a Golf GTI.
Well, you didn't say Golf, you said GTI, so
Yeah, I
you were
did.
right.
But yeah.
So speaking of icons, the Ford Mustang's been around for, I don't know, since the start of time, it seems. 64, that's a long time. Longer by 12 years than the GTI. But it's the only muscle car left because the Camaro's dead, and I wouldn't really call what Dodge is making a muscle car right now. Even when it gets the Hurricane, it's still not the same sort of idea.
Yes.
Its sales aren't doing so well for the Mustang. In the first quarter of this year, sales are down 31%. And you think no competitors. It's the only V8 pony car and arguably the best one to drive in a long time from Ford. But I have a lot of friends who own Mustangs of like a variety of generations, and they've owned a variety of Mustangs. So they're like Mustang owners through and through. And as much as I like it, they really, the number one sticking point on this new car is the look. Like everyone's going on about how it doesn't look like a Mustang. And I'm like, I don't know. I think it looks good, but maybe it's because I'm not a Mustang fanatic. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that was the talk when the last generation first debuted, right? Was like, oh, it doesn't look like a Mustang anymore. It looks like a Fusion coupe.
Yeah.
And it still looked like a Mustang, and I think we're gonna take some time to get used to this. I remember when this one launched and I saw it in person for the first time that it had a lot of Camaro vibes, especially the convertible from the rear three quarters because its haunches are the same. But so here's my hot take about this. Sales are down, and that's hard numbers that we can't really argue. But as we were just saying with the GTI, with internet commenters being like, oh, but everyone should drive a manual. Everyone in Europe does. I think everyone thinks that people want V8 muscle cars in droves in North America, and as it turns out, they don't. The other two already got rid of theirs, and the Mustang isn't doing well. I think it's a niche thing, but I also think like Ford will keep this forever. Ford will never get rid of the Mustang because it's their icon.
Well, in the past, when the other two have disappeared, because it's happened multiple times in history, the Ford always sold well and picked up the slack. And you can't say, well, Ford's down. Like Ford's down 1%. This is down 31%. So it doesn't correlate. I still think they sell well. I mean, the Challenger was selling like crazy before Dodge had to pull the plug on it. And this thing was selling well, but I think part of it is it doesn't have that identity. Dodge carved out this real muscle car look and feel that like I fully get it. I didn't like the Challenger as much as the Camaro when it first came out, and by the time they both died, I take a Challenger every day of the week. They did such a good job. So I still don't think the styling is what's hurting it. I mean, it still looks like a Mustang to me. It has the rear lights, even though they're at a crazy angle. There's people who own the last gen that are saying that, like, I didn't buy the new one because of these reasons. It's like, I can't think of a single reason why you wouldn't buy the new one over last gen. But if you have an older one with a different style and personality, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to dig into their deep dive numbers and see how much dropping the manual off the EcoBoost has hurt. I can't imagine there's a big take rate. It's definitely not 31%, but I'm wondering too if it's just, I don't know. It's not like a Halo thing. It's not like people come in saying, oh, I can get a manual and then they buy an auto. But there's just, I wonder if it's just kind of forgotten.
Don't quote me on this because it was a while ago, so I don't have the figures in front of me, but I very much want to say that they dropped it because the take rate was significantly lower than 10% for the manual EcoBoost. I don't think it was very popular.
Yeah, all our theories aside that we said, there's a number one reason why this is happening, and it arguably I get it and it's ridiculous. Pricing. The Mustang has gotten so expensive. The GT, just a couple of years ago, you get well under 30,000 in the US, and now it's like 45 or something.
I mean, you say a couple of years ago, it was like close to 20. That the GT was
no,
30.
No, it was like 5 years ago. You could still get, if you got a stripped out GT. Sorry, under 35.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. And you could get, and the Mustang started at 25 for the EcoBoost manual, which doesn't exist. But even the EcoBoost Auto is way up there. Like, it can't just go get a, it's not like an alternative to a compact car like it kind of was. Like, oh, you know what? I want to get a sporty pony coupe instead.
I think I think we were talking about this not too long ago, where Ford kept trying to make this more of an M3 competitor. It's much more of a sports car than a muscle car, and I think that's also translated to how well finished it is. Like, yeah, there's some cheap plastics inside the current car, but there's a lot of convenience features. Like, there's ventilated seats at a pretty affordable price in the trim walk, and I think that's the thing, right? This is also a bespoke platform at this point for Ford, and so you have to justify the cost somehow. On that note, I feel like maybe Ford should just start spinning different vehicles off this platform.
Now, I know there was a V6 and things have changed, but when I first came back 4 years ago, not even 3.5 years ago,
yeah,
we did a list, and the Mustang was 25 to start. I just looked it up. So 5 years later, not even, it's 33.5 is its starting price before destination. That's a significant jump for.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously got more power because it's the EcoBoost, not the V6, and there's probably more content. But yeah, it's to your M3 thing. I remember that Ford would always compare its performance to that, and I mean, couldn't they look across the city to Chevy, who had been doing that since the newish Camaro came out from the start? They were like, this is a sports car, and it never really took off. And then if you look the other way, oh, look what Dodge is doing. And Chevy knew, like, we can't be big and boisterous like the Dodge. We don't have the looks like the Mustang, so we're gonna do performance. But
yeah, it's
But like I said, it's not gonna die anytime soon, but it's just sad to see it's kind of lost right now.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on, Ram has officially secured a design patent for a midsize pickup in America. I mean, that may sound like, ooh, big deal, but that basically means they have a design that they want to bring to America. I mean, they've officially registered it. The question is, what are they going to call it? What's it going to be? But Ram. I keep saying Dodge. Ram of all companies, I feel, needs the midsize. I know the Dakota was pretty popular back in its day when that size was popular, but they're the truck people. They could do like a mini Ram, and I think it would sell as long as you price it as a mini Ram.
What do you call it? Do you call it a goat?
No, it would be a kid, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah. I guess Ford might be a little upset if you start doing goat things, but
Yeah, the goat mows. Yeah.
Well, so the Rampage is a compact pickup elsewhere, right, in South America, and that is based on a car platform, so it's very much like the Maverick. But this is going to be different and bigger, but not big.
Yeah, obviously Ranger, Frontier, Tacoma, like what the Dakota used to be. But the Dakota, sort of when it died, it was sort of a fraction of a size bigger than those. Like it was like the original midsize truck, because we still call those other ones compacts, and then they've all since grown to that size. But yeah, I mean, I just think like Ram is a truck brand, and they kind of have a truck and they have a van. So it makes sense having another one. And like I said, because it's what they specialize in, maybe you can really make a wide range and have, like, if you could price it under everybody with a work. No, they're not the work truck. What do they call their tradesman? You could have a stripped out tradesman for hardly any money with even just a regular cab. Could sell well.
Mike, do you hear how un-Stellantis you were talking though? You're talking about spreading into a wide lineup instead of just having one or two models and calling that a brand. And you're talking about undercutting things instead of being way more expensive than all your competitors. That doesn't sound like a Stellantis approach, but I mean maybe they'll try something new.
It's a new day. So, finishing up our last story of the week, because we have a lot to get to later, Honda did the obvious and they trail sported the hybrid CR-V. And I mean, why they were like, they needed a hybrid, or sorry, hybrid. They needed to trail sport everything. So, like, this is just a given. It should have been done.
So this does surprise me a little bit because we knew the trail sport was coming, but every other model in this class ignores the hybrid for its off-roady trim. Toyota did have the Woodlands, but it removed a lot of the off-road features of the TRD off-road. So it just had like a slightly jacked up suspension. So this is more of a choice. I mean, it's smart for Honda to do it because if 50% of the CR-V sales are hybrid, well, then why not make that percentage for the trail sport too? You might as well. You can charge more money and have better profits, and also people love saving gas.
Yeah, I'm to your point about it being the first one. I think part of it is the CR-V is a little unique where it's structured like that's its upgraded engine is the hybrid, and it's structured where, like you said, over half the vehicles are hybrids. I know Toyota has a ton of RAV4 hybrid versions, but they have even more gas versions. With the CR-V, once you get to mid trim, it's like no more gas engine. Well, there's a gas engine, but now you're into hybrids. So
yeah,
and I'm really curious because you've driven the Passport and I've driven the Pilot, and the Trail Sport is not like all their competitors. Some do this too, but they actually go in with like different transmission tuning and engine mapping, and they're raised up in all terrain tires. Like I was really surprised at how capable the Pilot was compared to basically everything else in that category, short of maybe. Well, there's not even like an Ascent Wilderness, so it ends up being like it's more than the Rock Creek. The Rock Creek has cool tires and body stuff,
but that's it. Yeah, and the Passport Trail Sport is basically the new like de facto icon or like halo model of trail sports. It is surprisingly capable for being a unibody. So yeah, I'm curious. This could really expand the CR-V's appeal to even more people. And I mean, it's already the second best selling SUV out there. So the RAV4 might actually be in trouble for the first time in a while.
I like to point out I need to mention this because I couldn't remember the off-road 3-row that is like all in, and that's the Chevy. The Traverse Z71 has like a whole different vehicle underneath, and and that thing's capable. And it's funny because the Passport, it's like, are we entering an era where technology has come so far, even sideways mounted unibody vehicles can off-road like the traditional ones? Because Jeep decades ago showed us you could make a hardcore unibody off-roader, but I mean, it still had the engine pointed north-south and had a lot of sort of truck bits just transferred. But yeah, as I'm sure the world wants to, and I know we do, when that Passport Trail Sport shows up, it and a 4Runner need to go play in the mud right away.
Yes.
All right, well, that is it for our news. Kyle and I will explain to you at the end of the episode why it's a little light this week, because we've been a little busy. Yeah, a little busy. So we're going to take a quick break on the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. And when I come back, I will have Greg on to talk about a product, one of my favorite adventures in the summer. Then we'll take another longer break, and we'll be back with someone that maybe a lot of you know. And if you don't, you should get to know. And then Colum will be here to talk F1, and Kyle will be back to help me wrap it up. Swapping out your tires? There's nothing like it. With eBay, you'll find the feel you're looking for, from smooth highway rides to grip for rough terrain. Get all the tires you need at prices you'll love. eBay, things people love. All right, we have Greg back to talk products, and this week it looks like we're continuing on the theme of spring and summer coming. What are we going to talk about?
All right. It is the month of May. I think this is an outstanding time to go camping. So we're going to talk about our list about things you need to go camping with your car as a little bit of a base camp. We got a great list here. You can check it out. You can see it right there if you're watching this on video.
Mhm.
And to me, this is just kind of like a basics. It's almost like a starting point of things you might need. So, a lot of good things here. I think, for starters, obviously an emergency kit, a portable generator, walkie-talkies, and like some sort of flashlight / lantern. Those are your baseline. After that, you could bring like a TV if you want, hook it up to your generator or inverter or something and, say your F-150, but these are the basics. So I think this is a, pretty good starting point. I like these lanterns that we have in our list. I think those are, they're fittingly called super brights. I have ones like these. I also have the tried and true Coleman lanterns too. I mean, I think everybody has a Coleman lantern or flashlight. That's great. Another one that I take, another Coleman product that I take when we go up north, as we say here in the Midwest, is the Coleman cabin tent. It's big. You can put 4 people in it easily, 3 people, no problem. A very large dog fits in easily. So I think those are, when I go camping with my, sometimes it's the family GMC Acadia as a base. Those are literally 2 of the things I take.
Yeah, tents are important, obviously, when you're camping. And something I don't currently own, I have a nice big tent, but I'm really getting into car tents, the ones that have the flaps that attach to the car, because then you have your sort of your food and whatever base right there, and you can have it secured and sealed at night, so you don't have to worry about animals, and you don't have to wander across the site if you need to get something.
Exactly. And if you do need to get something, you might want to take a walkie-talkie with you. So you got to check out, we have a Motorola set on there for fairly affordable. I think there's a number of them that you can find on all sorts of online marketplaces or at your local, sporting goods store, that sort of thing, hardware store. But we've actually found those to be super useful. Like if the kids wander off, but they like to have the walkie-talkie because, hey, you're a kid, this is fun. You can kind of track them down. And it's more direct and it's lower tech than say like literally chipping your kid with like an Apple AirTag or something. This is it's a little more old school, a little more geriatric millennial, I guess, which is my generation. So these are fun.
Even if you're an adult, I mean, you can get disorientated at night coming back from the washroom and be like, where am I?
Oh yeah.
And it might not be self-service in the campground. So
that's a great point. I mean, assuming you're going somewhere that's fairly interesting, the restroom, so to speak, may be fairly far from where your cabin is or where your tent or where you've parked, and there may not be people. And, hopefully you've got those bright stars kind of shining overhead, and that's a great thing. But if you don't, you might need some help. Flashlight for sure, walkie-talkie. That's like, 1A. You got to have them all. So there's a lot of good things in here. We actually talked about this other one, which is not an essential, but it's a lot of fun. Portable speaker. That's here on the list. Refer back a couple episodes and you can see all the different ones we recommended. I like the Wonder Boom, but hey, you're camping, you've got your car, you've ostensibly got some power for these things. Hey, turn up the music. Camping's supposed to be fun, right?
And after you're done looking at our list and figuring out all your camping gear you need, we have an entire website, AutoGuide.com, to look at vehicles to take you camping. So, hey, there you go.
There you go. Nice transition. I think on a future segment, we'll have to maybe look at some of these like different coolers and things like that. And yes, don't worry. We do have plenty of car care products. There's some in my garage that different vendors, our friends, our partners, if you will, have sent me. I'm very excited to test those out. But literally, this is one of the first warm days we've had, and it's May. So I haven't quite been able to wash the car yet. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, waiting for spring. Maybe it'll come by June. All right, well, thanks for joining us, Greg. And hopefully next week we have more nice weather and we'll get to start talking about some hands-on experience with products.
Sounds good. See you later, Mike.
See ya. Picture this. You're in the garage, your favorite room in the house, and you're tuning up your engine with parts you found on eBay. Every piece is just locking perfectly into place. You step back to admire your work, hands covered in grease, and because you're committed to driving that thing further than the odometer can handle, you start to think to yourself, you know what, I could probably also use some new brakes, some shocks and struts, and this baby deserves a new air filter. So you head right back to eBay. You can find any part you need there. It's unreal. From wipers and headlights to cold air intakes, exhaust systems, and even that turbo you've had on your mind. eBay is the stocked garage of your dreams. and you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. Because eBay knows DIY fixes can be major, and mods are always intense, so you need to know that these parts guaranteed to fit every time before you dive in wrench first. And in the off chance you order a part and it doesn't fit, send it back, simple as that. You know what you love more than the car itself is driving it. You're serious when it comes to engine maintenance, and you're locked in when you're headed into a build. And that's exactly why you start with eBay, minor fix or complete overhaul. You want to get your ride back on the road, and you've got eBay Guaranteed Fit. So eBay created My Garage, where all you have to do is add your ride's info and get the exact parts that fit. When you see the green check, you're a click away from that part clicking perfectly into place. So now that you know all that, imagine standing at that open garage door looking at your car you love more than anything, knowing that anything is possible. Whether it's keeping it on the road forever or turning it into something that's never been on the road before. Because with eBay, your garage just got a whole lot bigger. Get all the parts you need at prices you love, guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. Hey everyone, and welcome back. This week we have a guest I've been trying to get on for a while. We finally were able to nail him down for a time slot. If you could just introduce yourself and I guess some of what you do.
My name is Bozi Tatarevic. I do a bunch of everything. Work on cars, race cars recently a lot. So I'm a race mechanic on the Sealmaster, Vassar, Sullivan, Lexus, RCF, GT3, and IMSA. I work on street cars too. Grew up kind of modifying cars and doing stuff like that. And then in addition to that, I write, do some video content, and a bunch of other little things, all in the kind of car and racing scene.
Yeah, so you're definitely heavily involved with the automotive world. We first, well, not met, but we first started talking on social at least a decade ago. And I remember at the time you were I was reviewing cars and looking to move on because my son was born, and you were starting to write. And then I just sort of followed your career, which has gone really good and really fast, which is great. But, you know, someone who has passion and talent, it's going to happen. But let's go back to the beginning. Were you into cars always, or was there someone in the family that kind of got you interested in them?
My dad was always into cars. So I was born in the former Yugoslavia. And even back home when I was a very young kid, he had always some kind of project. I think the last one I remember was like a Renault 5 that he was tweaking on and working. But growing up in the former Yugoslavia, we had a lot of, Zastavas, Yugos, and Scalas and stuff like that. So I know at one point he had a Yugo, and I think he put in like a slightly bigger carburetor and some other things. So I was exposed to that environment as a young kid. And then when we came to the States, he worked as a mechanic. So a lot of times he would pick up side work. So he'd bring cars back home, or he'd work on neighbors' cars. And that's kind of how I got into it. My brother did as well. And then as we became teenagers and started driving, he basically said, hey, I can get you a nicer car than you could typically get for a teenager, but you're going to have to fix it. So I remember for me, that was a 1992 Mitsubishi Diamante that had leaky valve stem seals. So we worked on it together for like a couple of weekends. He obviously did most of the work, but I learned some of the basics of that. And that kind of started my path into just car enthusiasm and, just where I am today.
That's a rare call out of a car, the big old Diamante. They're near luxury, I guess you would call it. Is that at the V6?
Yep. It was the V6. So
nice.
That was also like in the 3000 GT and a couple of other cars, the Montero Sport eventually. But for me, that was nice because everybody else was, driving like early 80s or mid 80s stuff kind of, in my friend group, that's like, Oldsmobiles or Buicks or whatever they could get from, their grandparents or find, for sale. But here I had this nice car that had leather interior, it had a 6-disc CD changer in the trunk, which was like, just burning CDs back in the day. That was a big deal. But that, that allowed me to learn kind of some skills there that I was like, hey, this is kind of interesting. So that started me down a path where I eventually, as I started doing some part-time jobs, I ended up buying another Mitsubishi. So I had a whole Mitsubishi row of cars because my dad worked at that dealership and I was exposed to them. So I ended up buying like a Mirage, learning how to drive a manual gearbox and all this other stuff. And eventually that led into bigger enthusiasm. And really, as I got into my 20s, I studied like IT tech stuff, but I still modified cars on the side. We did like junkyard turbo kits with my buddies, LS swaps, whatever we could come up with. And that kind of connected me to where I am now because I started posting, on message boards and forums and interacting with people there. And eventually some of the projects I worked on, I was like, hey, this could be cool to share with people. So I would write these detailed guides. And that's like the first inclination that I had. Hey, I might like writing.
What do you think the biggest challenge is, like making that transition into like the writing side of things? You know, it's the media is a notoriously tough business. I know you got a lot of different sort of irons in the fire, which frankly is probably a good thing in the modern media. But what's like the toughest challenge about trying to make that transition like you did, over a decade ago?
For me, really, it was that I didn't know how much I didn't know. So knowing like the technical aspects of it was absolutely an important piece, but knowing how to properly write to engage somebody that's reading it, to edit, so you have proper structure. There's all these other things that happen that, people may not realize. So me as a young kid, I was like, hey, I know all this stuff. I'm just going to write it, and blog about it. And initially I just blogged about it on my own and I got some engagement. But when I started pitching myself to professional outlets, I learned very quickly, all right, we got to have this structure. And then, once you actually publish it, you got to like kind of curate it if you really want the engagement to keep going. So interact with the audience when possible, do a lot of stuff. But for me, it was just learning all the writing aspects of it and how that process works, and being able to first understand what I'm submitting to an editor so they can actually read what I'm writing. Because if you get too into the weeds on technical stuff, it doesn't matter that if it's accurate, if nobody can relate to it, then it's not valuable. So that was one of the big skills for me, specifically writing about technical topics, is, all right, I got to make this so my editor understands what they're editing. And then eventually I was like, I also have to teach myself to do basic edits before it ever gets to the editor. So teaching myself how to think like my editors think was a big deal. And then eventually, once I learned that skill set and learned some of these other things, I could start pitching to more places. But while all that was going on, it was also very important for me to engross myself in reading everything I possibly could. And I think that's a big takeaway that many may not think about, is read a bunch of different people. And even if you're in the car space, you don't have to read about cars. You can read about other things just to see what people are writing, how they're writing it, so you could, absorb and learn things, and it'll make you better as a writer.
Yeah, so clearly from all the things you do and have done, you're obviously a quick learner, and you really like to dig into things. I mean, I don't know if I know anyone who can break things down on a technical level like so intricately than some of the stuff you've posted. Like, I'm reading it and it's like way beyond things I understand, but like you get it and you just pick it apart. But there's a lot of things that you have posted and described. I'm like, oh, that makes sense, or I didn't know that was what it is. So that was sort of your start in this industry. And I meant to say this earlier for our listeners. I know we had Camille on last week, and we have this sort of Eastern European theme going, because he was talking about growing up with Yugos and Lada. We had a whole lot on Nivea and what was the Canadian one called? Sentry, because we got both those for sale up here in Canada that the US never got, and they've become quite the collector's items, but the ones that didn't rust away. But anyway, back to your role. So you knew how to work on cars, and then you learned how to write, and did that really well. But you always obviously wanted to take sort of your working with cars further. I don't remember when I first saw when you started getting into the motorsports side. I think the first thing I remember distinctly years ago was you crew chiefed, it was a Subaru BRZ or a FRS in one of the classes.
And SRO, yep.
Yeah.
So that actually started from the writing, oddly enough. So I started out, one of my first paid gigs was writing for The Truth About Cars, and I met a bunch of people through there. And at the time, I think Jack Baruth was editor, and he was buying a bunch of like amateur race cars that whatever he could get his hands on. And that was my first exposure to race cars. I had worked on a lot of street cars, and I had started my own shop later on in my 20s with my dad and my brother, and we did a bunch of stuff. But race cars, like, I understood the mechanical components, but actually working on race cars, tuning them and adjusting them for, those scenarios, I didn't really understand. So what ended up happening is there were a bunch of media people. So that Jack invited to like an American endurance racing race. And that's where I met people like Travis Sokolsky, Matt Farah, Sam Smith, a bunch of these people that were in the writing space that were also motorsports enthusiasts. So that was my first exposure, is working on that MX-5 in American Endurance Racing, it was just kind of trial by fire. They're like, hey, we know this mechanic guy, and I could fix the mechanical components, but them telling me feedback about the car was not something I understood. So at that point, I decided, I was like, hey, this is fun. I'm going to read about this and try to teach myself of like what all this means outside of just the bare mechanical stuff. So that was kind of my start. And eventually I was riding for Road and Track there with Travis and Jack, and we ended up going to a Pirelli World Challenge race because Jack was doing a story series on this Accord that he had acquired, and that was 2017 or 2018, I think 2018. So I met some people there, and that was kind of my launch into that BRZ program, where eventually I met the car owner of that BRZ at that Watkins Glen race late in 2018, and then 2019 I just kind of reached out to everybody I had met, and TechSport was a company that was like, hey, we need some help at COTA. We have a bunch of BRZs that were running in this touring car class in SRO. You want to come? So I ended up going down there, and the case ended up being that the primary mechanic I was supposed to work with wasn't able to make it, so I ended up being the primary race mechanic on this car and like crew chiefing it for the season eventually. And we did really well. Finished second in the championship in that class out of I think like 18 cars, which was pretty decent. And during that time, I met a gentleman named Louis Pericarpi, who runs Lap Motorsports. So they competed in SRO, and they also competed in IMSA. Well, one of their guys was away because they were expecting a child. So they asked me to come fill in on their IMSA team. And I showed up to Watkins Glen with them. This was mid-2019, competing with the Honda Civic Type R TCR. That was my first exposure to a TCR car. We ended up winning the race. I was like, this is kind of fun. So I basically just started parlaying each opportunity into the next. Ended up on another TCR deal in IMSA. And then in 2020, Aim Vassar Sullivan, which was partnered with Aim Autosport out of Canada at the time, because of COVID restrictions, they had trouble getting some mechanics occasionally back and forth across the border. So I'd heard about that. So I reached out, I was like, hey, you guys want to just give me a chance? I'll drive over to a race. You don't have to put me up. And fortunately, they were like, no, we'll fly you out, do this and that. And I kind of, sold myself just based on the TCR experience, but I had never worked on a GT car at the time. I was like, hey, I have this experience. I'll, learn whatever I need to learn to work on a GT car. So I went to Mid-Ohio with them in the fall of 2020. First ever over-the-wall GT pit stop that I did there. We ended up winning that race. So that was, I think, the first 3 or 4 teams that I worked with, the debut race with each team, we ended up winning. So I had some really good fortune there, and just basically was able to parlay that into another opportunity, and so on. And then at the end of 2020, Aim Vassar Sullivan became Vassar Sullivan, based now in North Carolina. And they asked me I wanted to do a year-long contract. And I've kind of been renewing since then. And I've been there now for, 5th year. So, picked up a bunch of wins, a championship, all kinds of cool stuff.
And the car's in Gran Turismo.
Yeah, that's pretty fun. Yeah, there's it appears everywhere, and that's kind of a really cool deal. Having such a prominent car with the Dayglow yellow is that people immediately remember it, and so that's our fire suits having those colors it's a very easy connection. So a lot of times at the track, or even in different professional settings, when I mention the name, everybody's like, yes, Gran Turismo, I know that car. So that's always been kind of neat.
So what's your exact role of the team now? Because it has changed over the years, right?
Sure. So I started out as kind of a entry-level racing mechanic, and worked my way up to being a higher-level racing mechanic, and also a tire carrier. So during the lead up to the race, I'll adjust on the car, work with our car chief, our engineers. Basically, we'll tweak stuff, and then during the race, I'm the guy that hops over the wall, runs around with the tires, and hangs them on the car. I don't work in the shop there full time, so I'm solely a race weekend specialist, so to say. So I fly in the Wednesday or Thursday before a race. I do the races. Occasionally I'll go to the shop between races if we need to practice something or do something to that effect, but I don't do any of the kind of in-between stuff. And then over the years, as the team recognized kind of my my connections with media and my ability, to talk to people, they've given me kind of an ambassador role, is the best way to explain it. So in addition to all the race weekend stuff that I do with the car, I also do video content, do a bunch of other things explaining what's going on with the race, what's going on with the car, what we're doing. And that's been really cool, because they were able to recognize that and say, hey, this benefits all of us if we let you do this. So for me, it works out because I get to do fun stuff in between the other fun stuff. And so there's not a lot of, time doing, maybe some menial tasks or whatever. And then I'm able to kind of take that and connect it to the series, connect it to the series partners. So that's kind of grown into working with the series itself. So I've done some video work for the series. I've done some other stuff. And then I've worked with like Michelin, who's the tire partner of IMSA, and Tangent Vector was a production company that's doing this Vinda Weekend docu-series. So that's some of the other stuff I do, where I appear on camera for stuff like that. I'll write for it. So it's been really cool that the team has been so flexible, because often in racing, everything's secretive. So most race teams don't want their mechanics out in the public, don't want them talking to anybody. But here, I'm encouraged to do it. And occasionally the team will send me to even do appearances with fans or sponsors or whoever else if they see a benefit to it. So it's been really, really neat to have kind of a bunch of different roles with the team.
You have, I think, a very unique perspective too, that you can tell people really what it's like to be in pit lane, work under that pressure, and just all the problem solving that goes along with that. How do you sort of like explain to fans what it's really like behind the scenes?
I think for me, it's all the stuff that they don't see on TV, because they can see, the car on track, driver going in, pit stops, tire being changed, and understand what happens there. But the other 90% of the race, for us at least, when I'm not over the wall for those 12 or 15 seconds, that's kind of what I focused on. So I show them, hey, this is what we do to prepare. This is how we stretch. This is what we eat. This is how we come up with contingency plans. This is what happens when things don't go our way. This is what happens, at hour 21 of the Rolex 24 of like, this is, all these small details in between the action over the wall is really what's been key for me, because, especially with race fans, there's a hunger to get inside. And outside of that, I also share, I've done vlogs and things like that where we start out completely off the track. So, me and the rest of my crew will record, whether we're at the hotel. Or one really cool one last year I did was at Sebring, where we had a pit crew Airbnb. The team, because of the way Sebring is located, the team got us an Airbnb because it was more convenient. It was like this, I think it was 11-bedroom house on the lake. So I did a vlog from the house of us just spending time together, cooking out, and then transitioning to the track, getting serious at the track, then back to the house, then back to doing a 12-hour race. So that's sharing stuff like that has been really cool and a really nice way to connect, with fans. And I can see over time, as I've shared more and more, just the interaction I get at the track, or even outside at different events of like, hey, I saw this thing, on social media. I saw this thing on YouTube. Are you that guy? I'm like, yes, I'm that guy. And then, they'll just bring about a whole different situations. It's been fascinating to see how that, that's transpired.
Yeah, I think not that you're selling yourself short, but I don't think you're making it sound like the team gave these opportunities. But I've, as I said, been following you for a long time, and you really sort of hustled and got yourself into this. Like, I remember when we first started chatting, I was a new car reviewer and you're trying to get into the writing space, and we had like 10 followers each, and we just would chat. And then seeing with your writing and the stuff you just post for free, just as information, and got you all these opportunities, and your followers grew. But over COVID is when it really blew up, because you were, I don't know if maybe from the start the team was having you do it, but you were posting so many things from the track and like following you along the 24 hours of Daytona and what's Bozi eating and when to get to sleep and stuff like that. And like no one was doing that. And your presence and followers just exploded. And as you said, now people like recognize you and you have a huge following and people expect it. But it was just really cool when you started doing that, because no one gave you that insight.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I recommend to others that are in the space and want to grow, is you got to take initiative sometimes. You got to understand what your limits are, because, there's certain obligations you have to your team. But back in 2020, when I started sharing this stuff, I took a bit of a risk initially, because, I was just a random mechanic that, one of the team managers had hired because he just needed extra mechanic help. So typically, most teams don't want you to have a cell phone out, obviously no cameras, video, whatever. So I took a calculated risk of like, I understand that I could probably share this stuff and it won't make anybody mad, and just start doing it little by little. And then by the time we got to the end of the year and I started talking to the PR people and kind of sharing what I was doing and sharing some of the results. They're like, oh, okay. And then it probably took another year before they officially said, all right, here, we want you to help us with this. So there's a part of it where you gotta kind of just have to take a risk and take some initiative to try some stuff. But the nice thing is, you got to be in the right situation for it, because I know with a lot of other teams, even if you do that, it won't happen. So for me, I'm fortunate that the leadership at Vassar Sullivan's like, hey, this is cool. Let's figure out how we can help you do this, because it helps us too. So that's a big part. But a lot of it's just trying to set goals and then use my time wisely to kind of push forward ideas of what I want to do.
Yeah, you've shown there's a lot of interesting things that aren't necessarily the actual race. Because I've been to IMSA and F1 and 24 Hours in Nürburgring, and they all have these crazy rules for media. Like, you can't film the race, any of the race, because they all have these exclusive contracts. But there's a lot of other stuff you can film around that's very interesting, and that's sort of what you have shown people.
And that's the big thing is, like, IMSA, and even when I've worked in NASCAR for a few races, there are very strict licensing rules. And one of the things I learned is there's a little bit of a gray area if you're a crew member and not there on a media credential. So I may have occasionally exploited that a little bit, but I figured out the best way to do it is to focus outside of that. So I do post pit stop content, and I've kind of worked out with the series and with team and everybody to be able to post it because it benefits everyone. But I'm not going to post stuff that would be on the race broadcast because there's licensing agreements there. So I focus on everything outside of that, because the broadcast isn't going to care that I had tomato soup at 2 a.m. at the Rolex 24. But people that follow along, in my threads will care. And that's what I've done, on Twitter over the years. And I think I did my first Rolex thread in 2021. And it's been fascinating to see just the engagement and the growth. And that's kind of helped me pick up gigs in the future, because I can show, hey, I do this thread that lasts 30 hours and, it gets, 1 million impressions or 1.5 million impressions compared to, there's people covering the race that won't do that across multiple things. So I was like, fans want to see this. Can I work with you to do that? And I've been able to parlay that into multiple opportunities. Like this year, I worked with motorsport.com to be their in-race correspondent. So that's a very, very unique opportunity where I can say, hey, here's, what I can do here. If you guys want to help me and you trust me to give me access to your social media, I can be your guy and share all this information. And then talking about that unique content is one of the things I planned out all these posts, because that's important, even, for social media, writing and everything. You got to have an outline of what you want to do. But the funny thing is, the most popular post that's, I think had millions of views by now is I was eating lunch. It was like hour 22 of, the Rolex 24. I was sitting on pit wall eating lunch, and I saw, I think it was JDC Miller was beside us with the Porsche 963. I saw them putting tires on the wall. So they're coming in for a pit stop. So I was like, hey, there's an opportunity to do something here. So I literally took my phone, set it on video, leaned it against our fuel rig, continued eating lunch. Car came in. I ate lunch and watched them do their pit stop a couple of feet away. And then the car left. I clipped the video, did a quick edit, threw it up, and immediately took off, because people were like, this is not something that I expected could happen, but it's an interesting, insight into the race. So there's always unique opportunities, and having access to do that is very, very, very important to be able to grow it. So it all kind of works together.
Your Twitter feed has truly exceptional food curation on it. Like the bananas Foster's lunch or dessert you had, that's great. I mean, I think that's what everybody likes to see, and it's always fun. It gives you that just slice of life, Oh
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Dessert's my big thing.
And IMSA should be thanking you, because now on the 24 Hours of Daytona Rolex, everyone plays Spot the Bozi game when they're watching the live feed. Like, oh, there he is in the pits. So there he's sleeping. And I think even the cameramen are onto it, because you seem to get on there quite often.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, after a while, I've made friends with a lot of these people. And now that they realize that they're getting engagement, we'll have conversations beforehand. And even NBC, before second most recent Sebring, there are people who will often reach out and be like, hey, we're doing this. We have these reporters in your section of pit lane. Do you have something interesting that you want to talk about, or do you want us to highlight? So it benefits everybody from multiple perspectives, because they can plan a story that if there's time, they can insert. And then for me, I can get TV time, the team can get TV time, and our sponsors can get TV time. So it works out for everybody. And I've also learned a lot about TV production through that, which is kind of just an additional helpful thing of like, hey, this is what pit lane reporters go through. And I know now that, they'll start with 100 possible stories. And because of the time and the production, they might have time to tell 3 of them. But if I give them, 8 or 9 storylines, one of those can be mine that gets told. So it's things may seem like they happen on accident occasionally, but more often than not, there's a lot of planning and a lot of stuff that happens beforehand, just like you guys are used to with, planning editorial and all these other things that people think, stuff just pops up. But no, there's hours and hours of meetings and plans and outlines sometimes before all that stuff happens. So it's all about relationships, really. And that's what I tell younger kids, that when they come to me like, hey, I want to get into racing, my first thing is, all right, what do you like to do? Do you want to work on the cars? Do you want to engineer the cars? Do you want to tell people about the cars? Do you want to be the travel manager? Like, you have to kind of figure out what lane you want. And then when they do that, I tell them, okay, now where are you located? Here's some local races you can go to see how all this works in a grassroots level. It'll allow you to meet people and tell you if you like to do it. And then from there, it's all just really a game of networking. Obviously, if you go to certain engineering schools or certain communications or journalism programs, there's mentors and people that can connect you. But more often than not, if you engross yourself in the environment, in addition to the schooling, that's kind of your best opportunity to get inside a racing gig.
Yeah, we've talked a lot on this podcast, a lot of guests, how none of us plan to do what we're doing. We've all kind of either the interest and the passion got us into it, or some of us lucked into it. But yeah, rarely does someone at like 16 say, this is what I'm going to do in the auto and get in it. It's everyone in here mostly likes cars. And I was like, great to get to your question in one sec, but something you mentioned about that video filming the Porsche coming while eating lunch. I got to go to Nürburgring 24 last year, and I was blown away because you never see it on TV. The garages have like 4 teams, sometimes even 5 teams jammed in this little space, and they're not even like within the same parent team, and they all have to kind of coordinate when their car is going to come into the pit stop because you can only have one car at a time, and they all in the little corners huddled. And it's just like for 24 hours, there's like 40 people in this tiny room, and like that alone is hard to deal with for some people.
Oh yeah, no, and that's the thing is like I've done this for a long time now, but I haven't been to the Nürburgring, so that's something that I'm learning from you just at this moment because I haven't been exposed to it. I knew they had garages, and I knew that there were a bunch of cars because they have classes, everything from like huge multi-million pro level stuff to like old, $8,000 or €8,000 cars that people have put together. But that's an interesting insight, and not something that I've ever had to deal with, but something that's kind of cool. So but that insider stuff is, it really kind of makes these races better. Being able to see behind the scenes, see how all that works, and talking about existing in that space. It's also the personalities and kind of the human relationships. And the way I always present it is, I say you can have a car or a team or a driver that's one entity or 2 entities that you can tell a story about. But if you have a team with multiple crew members and other people behind the scenes, you now might have 10 or 12 entities that you can tell a story about just from inside one team. And I've kind of taken the same approach to some of the media work I've done, whether it's on the NASCAR side and now covering some of Indy cars. I can see I'm always looking for a niche. And just like with the production car stuff, the writing I've done, it's the technical niche. And the racing stuff, when I write about NASCAR or do video or audio, I'm focused on the technical stuff, but also on the pit crews, because everybody's focused on the drivers, everybody's focused on the stats, but there's this whole other world where in NASCAR you have 5 over-the-wall pit crew members. So you could either focus on 36 drivers, or you can focus on a couple hundred crew members. And you have all these opportunities to tell these stories and tell these, techniques and things that happen and all this personality stuff behind the scenes. And I think having a mix of that is very, very important, because a lot of people immediately assume because I'm a technical person that all I want to know and talk about is kind of, the nuts and bolts of stuff. But really for me, it's the personalities that make or break a show and or make or break a story or whatever else. And I think the best example of that is Full Swing on Netflix. Like, I'm not a huge golf player. I never really paid attention to golf, But just seeing some of those personalities highlighted, I was like, okay, this person's interesting. Now I'm going to look for them. If I'm sitting, somewhere and golf comes on TV, like this is the guy that I'm going to see, try to cheer for because I like this story, even though I was never a golf fan before that. And that's really, going back to reading and occasionally watching as much as you can is why I try to take pieces from any type of media I consume and kind of figure out how I can use them back for what I'm doing.
Yeah, Drive to Survive is probably the reason there's 3 F1 races in the US right now. I don't think without that show you would have 3 races. No way.
Absolutely.
Very cool. I'm just a little. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I said it's a big deal to tell the stories.
Yeah, I was just curious. Speaking of storytelling, kind of an interesting chapter of your career involves Jimmy Johnson. So I'm curious if you have any just behind the scenes or what that was like. Such like a crossover, star just into the mainstream, public.
So that was that was a kind of a fun story for me, and it basically happened because of Twitter. So I started writing about NASCAR and tweeting about NASCAR like 2020-ish, and that's going back to that timeline of NASCAR was coming out with the next gen, the Generation 7 car, and there was stuff appearing in late 2019, and I was able to dig up some stuff that nobody else had seen. So that put me on the NASCAR scene, and it started to get me some followers from the series. And then as COVID happened, I kind of took advantage of all these Zoom media availabilities. So typically you have to have credentials, go to the track, talk to people, but because media wasn't allowed at the track, NASCAR was doing all these Zooms like almost every day of the week. So I logged into everyone I could just to learn who people were and occasionally start asking questions. And that kind of worked its way into starting to cover NASCAR, write about the stuff, getting access to some of the rule books and schematics. And then fast forward a couple of years later, I met Joey Cohen, who was the VP of competition at Legacy Motor Club at the time. So Jimmy Johnson had just bought into the team, and they were planning to run this extra car. So that fall prior, I had met Joey through Twitter. And that fall prior, Joey texted me. He's like, hey, I got a special project. Do you want in? And I was like, what is it? He's like, do you want to be on a Jimmy Johnson car? And I was like, absolutely, yes. Whatever it is, I'm down. I didn't know exactly what the plan was. So I went over to the shop. We discussed it. He's like, yeah, Jimmy's going to run the 500. We're putting together a car. We're putting together a crew. Do you want to be one of the mechanics? And I was like, absolutely, let's do this. So that was kind of neat to basically tweet my way into, being a mechanic in the Daytona 500, which is, kind of a rare opportunity with, people, don't typically find their way to that. But I had shown that I had learned enough about the next gen car being kind of one of the primary media technical sources on it that they felt comfortable to just invite me to drop in and start working on it. So that was a fascinating experience. And I didn't know what to expect because Jimmy Johnson's, a very prominent personality, 7-time NASCAR, Cup Series champion, all this other stuff. And the first time we showed up, he was just a regular guy. I was like, all right, this is cool. He was just like I remember in the hauler, I think it was either qualifying there or race day. He collected the whole crew, and he's like, "Listen, guys," he's like, "I understand that we've put together kind of a ragtag group of people, basically." You're paraphrasing, but he's like, "I'm here to have fun. I want you guys to have fun. Don't stress. Let's just go out there and do what we can. Let's enjoy ourselves and see what happens." And that was kind of neat to see that perspective of he was obviously an investor in this team. He was paying for all of us to come do this. And he was still just very relaxed and just a generally very relatable guy. And it also gave me a little bit of exposure of what the schedule looks like for somebody of at his level, because it seemed like he was never sitting down. Like there were just back to back stuff happening all day, between our stuff on track, practice or qualifying or the duels, whatever we had, and then immediately going to different meetings, media sessions. There were photographers there. There was, a magazine doing a feature. It was just a very, very fascinating look into this is, a ridiculous level to keep up, even though he was just doing a one-off race. So I highly respect what he does. And I just think he's just a genuinely nice guy, just based on my personal interactions with him and, even people in his group.
So just 2 quick things before we let you go. Is a pit stop as more chaotic in NASCAR as in like what it looks like on TV? Is it just all those bodies and cars coming in at once? Is it just chaos in there?
So it depends. So that's the one thing that I think people are often surprised when I explain it. For me, I find the actual over-the-wall part to be relaxing, because and I've quantified this. Like I have a fitness band, this Whoop that monitors heart rate, temperature, all these other things, and I've monitored it where I get the call for a pit stop and my heart rate jumps up a little bit just because adrenaline starts kicking off. But by the time I get on the wall, I'm completely calm. And then when I go over the wall, it's all muscle memory and just the mechanics of everything we practice. And we've done it so many times now and practiced it so many times that everything clicks off. And we have tools and video and everything to record what we're doing. But I would say just 3 or 4 steps into a pit stop, I can already tell like how quick it's going to be, because I know where the expectations are for my motions and all these other things, and everything that's going to happen. And then depending on, talking about all these people moving around the car, depending on where, my tire changers are moving around the car, I can tell whether they had an issue or whether, there's something else happening. But it seems very chaotic, especially when there are a bunch of cars, but it is a lot of practice, and it is very, very controlled in how it happens. And then on the NASCAR side, because they're moving so much more quickly, because in IMSA we have minimum refuel times and have one less person, things are a little bit slower. But on the NASCAR side, it's even more fine-tuned. And I've sat in on some of the NASCAR pit stop practices, tried some of the stuff, and it's fascinating to see just how close people get in order to be able to make all this stuff happen properly. In NASCAR, really the last frontier now for pit stops is that transition across the car where you have, tire changer, tire carrier, jackman, all finishing their job on the right side of the car, and then having the correct order and everybody being done at the same time to be able to run across the car together is the key to having fast pit stops. And not running into each other there is what takes a lot of practice, and why, the top pit crews are the top pit crews.
So I don't want to keep you too much longer. Just 2 quick things. So I hope to see you this summer. I assume you're coming to the July race at, I say Motorsport, but Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. So
we have to see Canadian Tire Motorsport Park because we don't want to get yelled at.
Yeah, I've tried to meet up with you a couple times, but it's never worked out. So hopefully this year it'll work. And just very quickly before you go, so I guess you couldn't have had a more disappointing 24 Hours of Daytona this year. How does the team handle that when, you're not even an hour into the race and you pretty much know the best you can do is just kind of run and test at this point?
So the way I look at it is I'm always thinking further ahead. And I know that we won the championship in 2023, and during the middle of that season, at certain points, we were only a handful of points, ahead or behind another car. And then I know when we finished, lower down the championship, occasionally we were only 10 or 15 points away. So the way I look at it is this is not going to be our year to win Rolex, but somebody else is probably going to break. There's 23 more hours to go. So every time somebody else has an issue, that's another 10 or 20 points for us. And I'm remembering, at the end of the previous season or 2 seasons ago, where we might have been 20 or 30 points away. So the way I look at it is every position we can gain through those next few hours is not only helping us, to understand the car better for future races this season, but it's stacking up points for that end of year tally. And that's, so big picture is always, always important. You're obviously disappointed and, you want to win the Rolex 24, which is like one of the things that I haven't had the opportunity to win. I've been very fortunate to, win Sebring and win a championship and win, almost every other track on the IMSA schedule except for Daytona. So that's disappointing, but I just look at it, big picture is what are our goals here and how can this contribute to us being a championship contender, in 8 or 10 races.
I think that's the mentality for all sports. You need to have a short memory and always be looking at the bigger picture because, you can't, especially when it's not your fault that something happens. Absolutely. Well, thank you for coming on, Bozi. Like I said, I hope to see you this summer, and we'll definitely have you back on. There's so much more we could have talked about, but you need to get back to work, and our viewers need to get on with some of their stuff too. So till next time, thanks again for coming, and all the luck at all the rest of the races this year.
Thank you for having me, guys.
All right, everyone, please welcome back Colum. This week we are talking more F1 as always, and it's race week. Although, as always, as people hear this, the race has already happened, but we don't know what's going to happen yet.
We don't. So we're filled with excitement. And after we had with the triple header, and then we had a week off, and now we had some racing again. So it always feels like after the triple header and then this break, you feel like you're like, oh man, it's been forever since I watched some Formula One, and it's been all of whatever, like 10 days, and I'm just losing my mind. So good to have it back.
Break really crushes you.
No.
Yeah, Miami race isn't always great, but there's always maybe a cool story that'll pop out of it.
Hopefully, although if you I don't know if you have my slides there, the first news is not good news if you're a big Miami race fan. If you're not a big Miami race fan, that they've extended their contract till 2041. So that's a long time away. So
I mean, it is like that's 16 years, which is long anyway, but 41 just sounds so far away. Like that sounds like some futuristic sci-fi movie.
Exactly. Yeah. That's when the T1000s will come for us all, which is funny. Actually, the T1000s I think were like years ago if you look at the history. But I saw a great joke online. Someone saying that with the news of, I don't know if you saw that today because I know you were out and busy. Max Verstappen's baby Lily was born. That Lily will be racing at the 2041 Miami Grand Prix.
Yeah, they could have like remotely driven, battery powered, who knows what by then. Well, hopefully they have 16 years to keep modifying the track to make it more and more exciting. I mean, they got the pavement to stop ripping up, so that was a plus. And they don't have water yet, but
no, maybe one of these days, they'll bring the marina to life. I don't know. It's things happen. Baku, there was a couple of years, Baku was like known as like a terrible race. And then everyone's like, oh, the terrible Baku race. And then since it built that reputation, like there was like 3 races in a row and it was fabulous. So maybe we'll get a winner out of this one. They said really that when they built this track, it was very sort of tight, and they thought, oh, we'll basically create it to purposefully cause issues and have crashes into walls, and I'll make it all chaotic. And then it was almost like all the drivers were like, we're not falling for that crap. We're going to drive a little bit more reasonable. And then the races have been pretty dull. So we'll see. You missed, sprint qualifying, but, it looks like there's some, it's building to be something good. So,
that's good. Yeah, I think races on some tracks that seem boring can also get more exciting if just the cars are more on par because they're fighting more. So we'll see. But rain. Hopefully we got 16 years to go.
All right. So here's just another. This is a rumor that people will definitely know by the time this goes live. That the rumor is that this Saturday, past Saturday, if you're listening, that Cadillac would actually debut maybe their livery or maybe just the colors that the Cadillac Formula One team will be racing in. So threw up a little picture of one of their lovely endurance cars, which looks pretty awesome. Nice yellow or gold and black. Who knows what they'll do? I've seen so many different renderings of the cars online. I just thought this looks pretty good. So
yeah, no one really races those colors, and this super or hypercar program hasn't been as successful as Cadillac would like, I'm sure. It's not as bad as when they went to Le Mans with the open cockpit racers that were silver many years ago, and pretty terrible.
Yeah, I guess
competitive, but it's not winning. But
I was going to say that was in like peak Audi period though, wasn't it? And Audi just wiped the floor with everybody for like 10 years in a row. So,
but those were really cool looking with their silver livery with the colors. But I think yellow and black would be good, or gold and black. No one's really using anything yellowy gold since Renault stopped being Renault. So
yeah, and as a part of this, apparently Sergio Perez is in Miami this weekend to chat with Cadillac potentially. So it sounds like they're still interested in him, but who knows? I'll keep tabs on the which drivers may race for Cadillac in the near future. So
Sergio Perez races for Cadillac in 26, and in race 12 he beats the second Red Bull driver, and all is good in his world.
Maybe.
Speaking of nice cars, what's this one here?
So this is George Russell just picked up his new Mercedes AMG 1. So I was doing a little research. So he did apparently. I guess the stats are kind of known on this car now. It's sort of F1 inspired, or actually uses, they say, a real F1 engine, 1.6 liter turbo V6, etc. Makes 1,063 horsepower. The interest costs $2.7 million. The interesting thing is it seems like, I don't know, there was a lot of controversy. I don't know, it seemed like this car came out and then it was like delayed forever. And then when it finally came out, it sort of missed some of the pomp and circumstance I feel like it should have gotten, because it is a really wild car. But so he's got it. He's got one. He just took delivery. Also, apparently Nico Rosberg has one, and Bottas, and Lewis Hamilton apparently has two, and Toto has one. So apparently Lewis gave one to his dad. So Lewis probably didn't pay for any of them. They're like, dude, Lewis, you want everything. Here you go. So, but yeah, so it's, George bragging about his new ride, and you would too if you had that. So.
Yeah, Lewis probably, like you said, it was delayed, so probably this deal was made a long time ago, and now it's sort of, oh, here's your Mercedes. You should park beside that F50 over there. Or the F40.
Yeah, super awkward. Yeah, no, the funny thing is these cars have actually been out for a while now, so it's funny that George only got his now, but I guess that's where he ranks on the list. Sorry, George. Who knows?
This car makes me sad. Quite sad, because it looks so nice. It reminds me so much of the golden era of those Le Mans one-off road cars turned to race cars, and that's what hypercar was promised sort of to be, and it's just become slightly different looking prototypes. I wanted these cars with road versions to be, because you imagine if Cadillac made one of these and Porsche and Audi made one of these, it would be so cool. But
that's what I think makes it partially so cool, is that there are you have that rare opportunity to see, or somebody gets to buy, Jay Leno buys a real, which is effectively like the homologation specials, right? That's what you're talking about. Those are so cool. Like when you see a CLK GTR, you're like, that's a wow. And the only reason that car exists is so they could pass a regulation to get it in the, they had to build 50 or whatever so they could race them. And that really, it actually propelled the street cars into a new category. Whereas you're right, the new, the hypercar stuff is kind of sort of hypercars.
Yeah, it's supposed to be more attainable for the OEMs and cheaper, which I'm sure the technology is, but it was also supposed to resemble the street cars or have street cars or whatnot. And it's like, okay, maybe the headlights are, but anyway, that's beside the point. This car is awesome, and it's absolutely right now shattered the Nürburgring times, because it is basically a race car. So I'm happy Mercedes made it. I'm just not happy I don't have one, but maybe I'll see one. I bet that's as close as I'll ever get to it.
There you go. Head to Pebble Beach.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. I am looking forward to this weekend, because I love I call it the four series race weekends, because you get the 2 qualifyings and the 2 races. So lots to watch and lots to keep track of.
Yeah, I'll be watching. Have a great weekend, Mike.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Okay. Well, it's been a action-packed, well, not really action, but very interesting. Bozi's a great guy. Like I said many times, I've known him for a while, and it's just great hearing his story, and it's great seeing someone who hustles and is smart and knows their stuff succeed.
Yeah, and I'm really sad I missed that one.
Yeah. We'll have him back on, like I said. We had to cut it, not even short. It was long, but there's so much more we could have talked about, so he'll definitely be back. Anyway, so as I mentioned, about 40 minutes ago, the news was a little light this week, because Kyle and I spent all week doing an 8 compact car comparison shootout, which went really well. It should be ready probably in the next 3 to 4 weeks, a month or so.
Yeah.
We had every compact car currently sold in North America that's an actual car. We had Sentra, Civic, Elantra, K4, Corolla, Jetta. I forget. Mazda 3, Impreza.
There we go.
I think that's all.
Yep.
So yeah, and it's one of those, we weren't surprised who won. We're not going to give anything away, but there were surprises. Good.
You're kind of giving it away there, to be honest.
Only for the astute listeners.
Yeah. It was fascinating, because, like you said, I think the bookends, we had our suspicions, but then everything else, it was like, we have no idea. We have no clue. And it's still an important segment, right? Especially as cars get more and more expensive. Vehicles. Cars are affordable. The starting prices for these are in the low to mid 20s for everything in the US. And they all topped out at just a little over 30.
Yeah, these are all the top trim models, more or less. The Impreza, we had the RS as opposed to, well, I guess in the States that is a top trim. But yeah, they were all just under 30 to just over 33. So it's a nice window. Maybe I spoiled who won, but I'll give 3 teasers that they won't know. We had 3 big surprises. It's incredible how close the mid pack was. And one car really surprised us how well it did, and one car really surprised us on how well it didn't do.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was this week. Next week we have a comparison, and we're sticking to compact. We are comparing the Armada to the Chevrolet Tahoe, both newish, big SUVs. I know people were like, "Oh, Tahoe buyers only go against the Expedition and the Wagoneer." It's like, what? Maybe some do cross shop between Japan and US, and it's also good to see sort of where the two philosophies are with these big trucks. I got the Armada already because it was ready early, and going from a Sentra to an Armada is quite the experience. I forget how big they are. I'm looking over the roof of like Lexus RX 500s on the road. Like, it's and I'm not in like high mode. That's just how big it is.
I'm looking forward to getting into the Tahoe because I want to see how good that engine is before it gets recalled. Oh,
it does have the package to upgrade to that 6.2. I'm looking forward to driving. I always love the 6.2. So
I mean, the 6.2 is a good engine.
Yeah, and it's the last of the V8s. It's like Mad Max, last of the V8 Interceptor in the big trucks. I mean, Ford. Can you get it in the Ford as an option, or is it only EcoBoost? I think
it's only EcoBoost. It's been that way for a while. And then
Jeep killed theirs.
Yeah. I mean, the inline 6 is really good, but it's not the same. You can get a V8 you can get a V8 in all the Germans. But then they're also turbocharged. This is the only naturally aspirated V8 left.
Well, and the Germans aren't competing with these
body
anyway.
on frame.
Yeah, and I mean maybe some do, but that's the Escalade. Like this is I can't say the affordable because they're not, but this is the more common versions. But yeah, the twin turbo V6 in the Armada, we had it in the QX80. I mean, it's not a GTR engine, but it's
as much as Nissan likes to say this.
Yeah, its life started in a similar path, and it's a fantastic engine too. But you never duplicate that big growly V8 and just the smoothness of the naturally aspirated V8. But yeah, I look forward to it. We'll have that soon. But we should really wrap this up and let our listeners get on with their day. So this has been the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. Until next week, we'll see you later.
So long, everybody.
Picture this. You're halfway through a DIY car fix, tools scattered everywhere, and boom, you realize you're missing a part. It's okay, because whatever it is, it's on eBay. They've got everything: brakes, headlights, cold air intakes, whatever you need, and it's guaranteed to fit, which means no more crossing your fingers and hoping you ordered the right thing. All the parts you need, at the prices you'll love, guaranteed fit every time. eBay, things people love.